All right, everybody. You should be able to hear me okay by now. We're back on Facebook Live on a Sunday morning, or if you've joined us at some point during the week, glad to have you on board for this kind of, a time to pause and reflect. So want to spend some time today together and kind of honor the spirit of, in the Christian tradition, this is the beginning of Lent. So we all just started Lent, and that's a 40-day, what would you call it? Like wilderness journey, right? The whole point of Lent is to mirror this passage time that people of Israel experienced as they left the bondage in Egypt, right? And tried to craft collectively a new kind of community together. And that journey in the wilderness for 40 years is mirrored in some of the Christian traditions with this 40-day journey that sort of invites people, like other religious traditions do the same thing, right? But this one invites people to be reflective for 40 days and to think about how you want to craft your life going forward. And it culminates, obviously, at the Easter season with this kind of a gift of new life that comes to the Christian community that invites them into a more fuller expression of God's kingdom or kingdom. So that's the pattern that's going on in that particular faith tradition this time of year. And so today I want to just spend some time thinking about what's an appropriate way to, do some wilderness time together during Lent. What do we pay attention to during this particular season that might draw us more fully into our capacity to, live healthy lives together, maybe spiritual lives together, sacred lives together, or just life together, as Dietrich Bonhoeffer liked to say, right? How do we just do life together? It's a great way of thinking about what might be part of this 40-day journey. So welcome. I'm going to talk today a little bit about, hold on a minute. I got one more thing I got to do before we get going. Okay. Oh my gosh. Sorry for all the technical mumbo jumbo, but I'm going to do this anyway. Okay. What are we going to talk about today? I'm sure all of you have been diving into the Soul Forum podcast series. It's a great series hosted by graduate students at the GTU, the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. And the last series, it's a 4-part series called Braving Confinement. Braving Confinement. And in it, Portia, the one who is guiding the interviews, is exploring with 4 different people what it is that gives shape over the course of that person's life to their social location, where they land inside the social fabric. And I would probably expand that to think, sort of in the life fabric, but let's just think of it as social location. Where do you find yourself? And to understand how you find yourself, it's important to kind of go back and realize all of these kind of key elements that make you who you are. Like, where did you grow up as a child? What were those experiences like? What kind of family system did you grow up in? That's going to have an effect on who you are. Did you have some sort of religious upbringing? Is that going to have an effect on who you are? What kind of education did you have? What kind of passions did you have? What kind of skin are you in? What kind of socioeconomic place are you in? I mean, you just think about all of these layers that constantly are evolving, that kind of make us who we are. And she takes that conversation about social location, and then she introduces this idea of intersectionality. I know it's complicated, it's wonkish, right? But I love it in that it says, how do all of those different pieces overlap? And what is the wonder or the mystery or the orientation that comes about as all of those pieces play out and intersect with each other, and then intersect with the current moment that you're in to create your sense of reality. And it's all very beautiful and insightful. And the stories that are told in this series are a wonderful way to kind of get a feel for how that works in the lives of those that she interviews. But what I'm going to ask you to think about today is, how could you think about that as well in your own life in this season of reflection, in this time to think about how your own soul or body or spirit or self manifests itself in relationship to all the other souls, bodies, and lives that are being lived, right? That's the beauty of it, to kind of drop into the complexity of it all. I will say that human beings have this tendency, and I have this tendency too. I'm totally guilty of this, and so are you. We all have this tendency that we just simply would wear out if we allowed for all the stimulation that comes our way, all of the kind of capacity for sensory exposure to be on the front burner, right? We just can't manage that. I have to focus right now on that green dot on my laptop. I would have focused on a different green dot, but that whole technology broke down this morning, right? So I had to abandon ship and move to my laptop, right? So I have to focus in on this. So I can't be bothered by what's going on outside right now. I just have to assume all that's pretty stable, right? I can't tend to it with the level of intensity that's required to do this and to pay attention to that too. I would just be overwhelmed, right? I already am overwhelmed by trying to pay attention to all the things I have to pay attention to on a Sunday morning. So you get it, right? We sort out what we have to pay attention to so we can be focused on the stuff that matters, that at least what we think matters, right? We do that. You do that. We can't pay attention to everything all the time. And so what we end up doing is we kind of create these buckets or categories, or we just sort of normalize some stuff, and we don't have to think about it anymore. In a sense, we plow a field enough in our experience with something to kind of create a rut, and then that rut is set, right? That field has been plowed. And we don't have to replow that field. It's just it's a mechanism that we use. Let me give you an example. Back in the day, people used to go to church. Remember that? You actually went to church. And back in the day when people went to church, they would walk into the sanctuary, and I would see them because I would be up front getting ready. And they would walk into the sanctuary, and they know, almost everybody, except if you're new to the place, knows exactly where to sit. Right? That's not an issue anymore. They plowed that row to the point where it becomes a rut, to the point where they come in, they probably go through the same pattern every time. It's a beautiful thing to watch, right? I can almost tell who's there by just scoping out the audience because I know where everybody sits. That's not something I have to worry about when I walk into church, right? I have my pew. And so you just land in that pew and you sit down, and that's something you don't have to give a lot of thought to, right? You've got your place figured out, and you just sit there, and it's a soft experience. Maybe, and I don't know if this is true, maybe so you can be more focused on what's happening up front. I don't know, but that's an example of it. I do the same thing from my perspective, right? I look out over the audience, and I don't actually, and I hate to admit this, but when I do my work on a Sunday morning back in the day, right, I don't actually always see the individuals. I'm not actually seeing you, because if I started looking at you, I would get too focused on the you that is you, right? And so I see all of you. And I too have created this experience where I wash away my capacity to experience each of you on a Sunday morning. And I have to hold you as a kind of a group, a body, right? And I look at the body of you. It's another perfect example. But something's missed, right, when we do that. Maybe we sometimes miss some of the nuancing. We maybe do too much of that. And imagine if you sat through the whole service, or I went through the whole experience, and all I was doing was just living in a massive rut of repetition that happens every time. And then my whole experience of the Sunday morning spiritual hour, if you will, was just a matter of just plopping myself in my rut, and I felt warm and comfy, and I kind of got through it. And then I got in my car and I went home. Right? What changes in me if that's the case, right? So that's a thing. That's a thing, and that's why I think it's important to pause every so often. And this 40-day experience is a perfect reason to pause and to kind of mirror the religious tradition that we honor in this season that's patterned after the life of Jesus, who spent 40 days in the wilderness. And his 40 days in that wilderness is sort of this mirror of like tending to that which is, all of the aspects of life itself that you can be aware of, this sort of intensity of focus, like a spirit quest that happens in indigenous cultures, or a retreat where you give yourself time to just clearly open your eyes and see, or open your ears and hear. It's that kind of invitation to, in a sense, drop away from all the rut behavior you've created and be fully aware, so that something might be revealed to you that allows you to live more fully. And at the end of this 40-day experience for Jesus, or this 40-day experience for anybody who enters into the kind of this wilderness time, there is a hope of some kind of wisdom or revelation, something that's lifted so you can see more clearly. There is a hope that something opens up even wider so that you might walk in a new way. That's the pattern. That's the pattern. To start kind of that journey today, I want to invite you into a piece of poetry. So I'm encouraging you, that's the whole point of this morning, just to encourage you to think about taking this journey together. That explores your own like social location, think about all the parts of who you are, honor that in other people, think about all the things that make them who they are, and all the ways they orient in world, and to approach each other and yourself, and maybe even the world itself in that way, so that you might see it with fresh eyes, right? That's the invitation. Anyway, to get us started today in that experience, I want to read a piece of poetry that we used in our Life Before God class that took place on Thursday at 11, which you're all invited to. And it's a poem by Wendell Berry. And I think it's an invitation poem to think about the way in which we kind of create ruts, or we plow fields, or we sow seeds in a row so that we can kind of just forget about them and move on to the next thing, right? We tend to do that. And in this piece of poetry, Wendell Berry is a farmer, and so he has this capacity to think about the spiritual in the context of his relationship to earth. And so I'm just going to have you pause for a moment and just maybe close your eyes and feel your feet grounded in Mother Earth, like weighted to the experience of gravity that holds you, and maybe even align your body so that gravity doesn't feel so oppressive. It just feels a little lighter, and breathe into the space for a moment, and then let this piece of poetry guide you into a moment of reflection that might think, how can I hold on to all the things that have been a part of my life in a way that allows them to show up more organically, and to be like hold them in a way that lets them find full expression, rather than always just thinking about them as categories of who I am that are in my past or behind me. Let them kind of be with you in a new way. All right. So this piece of poetry. I go by a field where I once cultivated a few poor crops. It is now covered in young trees. For the forest that belongs here has come back to reclaim its own. And I think of all the effort I have wasted, and all the time, and of how much joy I took in all that failed work, and how much it taught me. For in so failing, I learned something of my place, something of myself. And now I welcome back the trees. Take a deep breath and let me read that one more time. Feel the cadence of this invitation in the poetry. I go by a field where I once cultivated a few poor crops. It is now covered with young trees. For the forest that belongs here has come back and reclaimed its own. And I think of all the effort I have wasted and all the time, and of how much joy I took in that failed work and how much it taught me. For in so failing, I learned something of my place, something of myself, and now I welcome back the trees. How can we journey in such a way that allows the great forest of our lives to find its way again, right? That allows us to make space for the trees that really want to grow on the landscape of our lives, given all of that complexity. I truly think that is the invitation to journey that is available to us in this Lenten season. If you remember, Lent starts with a service they sometimes called Ash Wednesday. I'm not a huge fan of Ash Wednesday, but what I do like about Ash Wednesday is it is a reminder that we come from earth and to earth we return. It is a reminder that we are, in a sense, a part of the capacity of the soil to give expression. You know, we come out of the earth. It births us, right? We are part of the cosmos and the stars and the planets and the ecosystem. It's birthing us all the time. And out from that birthing place, we all return. And I love that energy of that kind of consciousness. And to live into that consciousness in this season, in my humble opinion, is the real invitation, right? How to do that. Let me talk a little bit about what might be helpful to do to spend some time reflecting on. I think it's important to maybe think about spirituality and even the time we spend together on a Sunday morning like this. That we're not, or at least I'm not, trying to do this. Other religious systems do this, and other pastors do this. So I don't take anything away from that, but it's just not something I'm interested in doing. And that is, we're not, in my mind, supposed to be spending our time and energy trying to master a fixed religious system, right? The whole point in my mind is not that you use the time you've slotted to focus on your spiritual life to master an established kind of dogmatic, structured system so that you've got something else to kind of like plowing ground, right, that creates another rut. That doesn't seem right to me. I don't think the point of spirituality should be this life-giving experience, right? So it's not about the forming the rut. That would be like being able to categorize it, set it aside and say, you know, well, I'm an ELCA Lutheran, and that's the end of that, right? And we love to do that, right? You think about politics back in the Trump era, right? I think one of the reasons why it was so seductive is that people could reduce all of the complexities of all of the kind of challenges we have as a country and in climate and in race, and all the complexities that we have to deal with as a country. We could boil it down to this. Do you love Donald Trump or do you not love Donald Trump? Right? It felt like that whole administration, they were still doing policy work, but the whole administration boiled it down to something so simple that you really didn't have to pay attention to anything growing in the weeds. You would align politically to whether you liked the guy or hated the guy, and that was it. I mean, and I was guilty of the same thing. So that's not what politics or spirituality should be about. Spirituality and politics should be about, you know, engaging the land, engaging the landscape in a meaningful way. So that's the first thing. It's about allowing yourself to see beyond all the kind of simple categories that you make, all the assumptions that you make, all the kind of expectations of self that you impose on you, all of that stuff that we just sort of use to box ourselves in and box in one another. It's a way out of that, right? It's a way out of that kind of prison. But to get out of that, you got to kind of journey in a new way in order to have something else revealed to you. And that's the power of the real, I think, living religious experience or spiritual experience. And if you think about it, most of the great spiritual leaders throughout the world, they all launched their vision of our collective life, no matter who you talk about, right? Mohammed, Buddha, Lao Tzu, who else? Oh, Jesus. You think about all these figures, and there's this way in which they give themselves to a time that allows them to see the other more clearly. If you think about Jesus, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, right? He didn't glean his wisdom from just going to the temple every week. He didn't glean his wisdom by paying attention to the kind of the social norms of the day and trying to fit in. He did it by engaging in a very rich and immersive experience in all of the, and I'm going to use that term, intersectionalities of his own time, right? The poor, the broken, the disenfranchised, the pagan, the religious person, the rich, the poor. That's what he was doing. He was really opening up his lens to see the experience of life in such a rich way. He begins to manifest and articulate kingdom in a new way, or God's kingdom in a new way, the big enchilada in a new way. That's what the spiritual leaders do. That is what revelation is all about, right? It's a unfolding back, pulling back the curtain and seeing what's behind the curtain. That's what's going on there. So can you, in this season, this is the invitation. This is an invitation to the Wendell Berry poem. Can you re-engage the landscape of your own life and the landscape of others in a way that allows all of the beautiful intersections and ways in which they have come into being to be visible to you, to see them again with a new set of eyes, to see yourself again with a new set of eyes, and feel like that's the good news, right? That is the good gift that you bring to yourself when you intentionally orient to others and world in such a way that you're doing that for 40 days, so that at the end of this 40-day period, in a sense, as the spring comes on, you too can blossom into a way of life that feels like it's grounded in who you really are and all the wonder of life that's manifesting itself within you and through you. In the podcast series, Portia interviewed 4 people, and they were, in my mind, like sacred conversations. And what I found fascinating about them, and I would encourage you to listen to that series, it's called Braving Confinement, 4-part series on Soul Forum. In that 4-part series, what I think Portia is up to, and I'm looking forward to interviewing her tomorrow and talking to her about this, and that will be that'll be episode 5 in this series. So you should listen to that one too. I think what she was up to was, in a sense, reframing a way in which we can make meaning in the world by really tending to the complexities of sort of our evolving life experience, right? And the way in which that life experience is intersecting with the world at the moment, but also intersects with itself. It's like a full immersion in the gift of life with these eyes to see it clearly enough that you realize things about self and world that you didn't realize before. Think about, you'll hear things in these interviews, like the role that, like waking up to white privilege that's a social place, right? My white privilege puts me in a particular position, and if that's just on a shelf and I'm not tending to that, I'm dismissing this huge complex um, influence over who I am and how I move in the world, right? But embracing it and understanding it more fully helps me to situate myself and relate more fully to the world. That's a perfect example. Being a male is that way. Being cisgender is that way. Um, you know, sitting where I am as a religious leader is that way. I mean, I have all these things that fit into that. I mentioned to Sam this morning before we were getting ready for our Zoom breakout session, which is coming up, which I got to get to quickly, that growing up in the Santa Cruz Mountains was that way for me, where there were just no boundaries at all. Every day was an invitation to discover the depth of the forest. And I think I still kind of live that way when I'm at my best, right? So all of those are parts of who I am that I want to hold on to during my 40 days and tend to them in a way that allows something beautiful to continue to grow in my life. That to me feels like a worthy Lenten experience. And it allows me not only to live into an awareness of my own self, but it's an invitation to be aware of the other as well. To not just have every experience be making sure that everything is in its category so that I can take the path of least resistance through my everyday. That's not the point. The point is this sort of a little bit more visceral engagement with others in the world. And that to me feels like the best spiritual work you can do, the best spiritual work you can do. There's a term for this that we've played within our faith community called appreciative inquiry. It's a way to think about how to kind of inquire of the other and of self in a way that is both appreciative and it kind of begins to accumulate a heightened awareness of yourself and your place in the world that allows you to have gratitude for all that is you and all that is the other, so that they become, they become a thou in the I thou relationship, right? You see them for who they are and you embrace you for who you are, right? You move into that level of consciousness, at least for a time, so that maybe you too on Easter morning, this is a metaphor, can burst out of that grave, right? And see the dawn of a new day. That's the pattern. That's the Lenten pattern. And that's the pattern I would invite you into. Maybe only if to allow that which you planted yesterday to begin to give way to that which can grow more naturally in the places in which you dwell. And to do that individually and then to figure out ways to do that collectively is the gift of this particular time of year. So let me close one more time with that piece of poetry. And I'll post this piece of poetry. I did that for the class, and I'll post it for folks too, so they can get access to it, because I think it's just so beautiful. And it also resonates with my sensitivity that an eco-spirituality is a huge need in our time as we engage the environment in a more, what would you call it, like faithful way, right? The environment is our birth mother, if you will. And boy, have we screwed that one up. So how do we reclaim a really sustainable relationship with the earth? So eco-spirituality, or seeing spirituality in the context of our relationship to earth, is a wonderful tool at kind of reinforcing that as well. A little side benefit of this poem. All right, one more time with the poem. I go by a field where I cultivated a few poor crops. It's now covered with young trees For the forest that belongs here has come back and reclaimed its own. And I think of all the effort that I have wasted and all the time and how much joy I took in that failed work and how much it taught me. For in so failing, I learned something of my place, something of myself. And now I welcome back the trees. Whew, I'm into that. All right, all. Hopefully that's been some thoughtful reflections for you. Again, I would encourage you to listen to the podcast series and make sure you're dialed in with that. I'm going to do a little bit of announcement time, and I can see Sam Ledoux is waiting to get into the into this call. I might just invite her into this call just for fun, but in fact, I think it will. And then let me do something here. And I just realized that I actually went the whole time without sharing any music with you, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to do that as well at some point. But I do want to talk about some stuff that's coming up. And to do that, I'm going to bring in Sam, and then we're going to leave Sam on here as we transition into our social time, which this call will morph into a Zoom call that you're invited to have a kind of a digital coffee hour and have a discussion with each other. So that's where we're headed at the end of this. So let me bring in Sam and Sam. Hey there.
Hey there, how are we doing?
Good. I got you early because I thought I'm going to do announcement time. And so you're in on the call because I like your idea. So Sam's idea, everybody, was that rather than having to listen to me the whole time, somebody else could kind of put together the announcement time, which I think is a really cool idea. And then at the end of this discussion, they would talk about the announcements. So we're going to launch that next week. Mark Fensky is actually going to come on. He's the president of the congregation, and he's going to do a little bit of a Zoom conversation about what's going on in the congregational life, since we're all sort of detached from it at the time. But I thought I'd have Sam kind of at least start with this, and then I'm going to morph us over and tell you how to get onto the Zoom coffee hour. And then you can jump in and we'll join you for that coffee hour. Does that sound like a plan?
I think that's great.
Sorry to spring this on you, Sam.
That's okay.
You were ready to go, I can tell. So I also want to remind you today is Scout Sunday. So we're honoring our relationship with Troop 200. We've been a charter organization for that troop for a long, long time. They have donated a wonderful gift to us that will be in a presentation that is going to get posted to Facebook Live later on today, I think. So watch for the presentation by our own Troop 200 and the offering of that gift, and the latest update on one of the great Eagle Scout projects that probably you don't know has been going on site as well. So that's happening. Also, a reminder to link into the podcast series, Soul Forum. Portia Tunzi has done a great job interviewing some people. You've been listening to that one, Sam? Yeah.
There's a lot of great stuff in there.
I agree. And we talked about social location and intersectionality today a little bit, but you really get a sense of how it functions in people's lives in those interviews. And it might help you to see how it functions in your own as well. So that's something to pay attention to. Obviously, a reminder, we have Women of the Old Testament on Monday, and Life Before God with Sam and I on Thursday at 11. So you can always jump into those. They're great ones to know as well. Another great thing that's happening on our social action front, we have two projects that have been kind of how we support our relationship to the environment. One has been the solar panels. That's been a big project that we undertook. And the other is our community supported agriculture project. And both are at this kind of milestone moment. Chris, who's a part of the project, and myself will be part of a national, webinar this week. And our whole solar project is being highlighted for over 200 participants that will learn how to do solar based on their own nonprofit or their own church through our experience. So quite a way to give that kind of continued gift to the world is happening, I think on Tuesday. I better know when it's happening. I'm supposed to be there. And the other one is a project we've been working on with our community supported agriculture project. Obviously, we have food that's grown locally. It supports the local food hub. It's all the right way to do food. It's a local farmer. there's no storage time. It's harvested, then it's on your plate. It's just a great way to live in relationship to the way in which Earth produces food. We've expanded that to do a pilot project of how to connect the farmer to senior care facilities. And so we're doing a pilot project using Riverdog Farm, our veg farmer, and the Elder Care Alliance, which is a network of senior living centers. And they're beginning to integrate food from the local farm into their food program. And we're helping to pilot that project. And then it's being proposed as part of the governor's master plan on aging to do this at a state level. So it's a great project. Some of the people in our CSA program are working on that one, and that one's getting some legs too. So that's exciting.
It's like the epitome of neighbor love right there.
Exactly right. I totally agree with you. The last thing is we have a new feature on our Facebook page. I know you all love Facebook, and that is the donate button. It took us months and months and months and months, but now when you are like blown away by Sam's announcement time, or you're so moved by my comments that you're like, I want to give the farm away, you can just hit the donate button and 100% of your donation goes right into the OSLC banking account. So it's a great way to kind of donate to, the work that we're doing. So feel free to do that at any time along the way. Sam, you got anything? What's been going on for you this week before we go into, I tell people about how to get into the coffee hour?
I mean, it's been a wild week. We've had start of Lent, which was really exciting.
Yeah.
Started doing my own reflection series for Lent. So
I'll offer what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
So I am going through a series of poems and also trekking around with my phone to various locations. And I'll pull a video that I think reflects the content of the poem and then do a voiceover over the video.
Oh my God.
And I've been sharing it with some of my schoolmates, and I would be happy to share it in this venue too.
Yes, that will have to happen. I mean, we all, and poetry's, I mean, what you're putting together is exactly what we were talking about when we interviewed you. That's the kind of journey we would like to know about.
The world in relation to.
Yeah. So let's talk this week about where could we, if you don't mind, where could we share that with this community?
Yeah,
I mean, that would
absolutely. I'd be happy to do it. So that's really been the big kickoff project. And along those lines, hopefully you can hear me a little better because I finally got my actual condenser mic set up. So that's pretty exciting.
That is. I know sound is always a pain in the rump. So I'm glad you figured that out. All right. Well, that's great. I'm really looking forward to that. I love poetry. I think it's a window to the soul that we don't often use. So that's great. All right, everybody, here's how to get to, so we're going to move over from here to our social time. And here's how to do it. If you can link to it with the link through Facebook, if you go down the feed, but it's a couple step process. So you have to open that up and then you'll see a Zoom link in that next, when you open up that page and tap on that Zoom link and it'll bring you over. Or you can go to the OSLC website and go to the media page and you'll see where it talks about the coffee hour. And that one, if you click that one, I think it takes you directly to the Zoom link. So that's another way to find us. But we want to invite y'all to come over whenever you'd like. And to do that, I'm going to stop streaming and I'm going to open up the